think we can probably get started. Thank you all for joining. We'll kick things off with Greg, who's going to do some introductions. I'm not sure if I don't think we can see you, but I think we can hear you.
All right, I am here. As a Greg Peary, Deputy Director of Environmental Health Services. So I also just want to thank everybody for coming on as welcome to the workshop and on the Reusable Foodware Ordinance to discuss the draft ordinance and the efforts so far, to get your input, and also with a goal and effort to reduce the single-use disposable foodware and increase reuse and compostables, and reduce litter, greenhouse gas, and also reduce the disposable landfills. So I just want to thank everybody for being here. And Claire Wilson, I'll send it back to you.
Great, thanks, Greg. And we also have, as part of our panel, Dana Armanino with the County of Marin and Chris DeTournay, who's a sub-consultant on this project and has a rich history with the Berkeley Ordinance, as well as just a long history in Marin County. So thank you all for joining again. Thanks for the great introduction, Greg. To get into some housekeeping before we get started, the presentation is going to be about 20 to 25 minutes long, followed by a Q&A. So after we finish the presentation, I will stop sharing my screen. I won't be able to see the questions really or be able to respond during the presentation, but afterwards we will do a Q&A and you can raise your hand in the Zoom function and I will call on you and we can get some questions answered hopefully. And if you didn't already hear, the meeting will be recorded and uploaded to the county's website after. So fear not if people that you know weren't able to make it to tonight's meeting, there will be an opportunity to view it later on. So with that, we can get started. So this project actually began in 2019, fall of 2019. The County of Marin contracted R3 Consulting and the project team that I'm a part of. And we got going very quickly. We started conducting stakeholder meetings. We sent out and distributed a survey, which had over 300 responses, all very much in favor of an ordinance of this kind. And then we had COVID hit. So the project was paused for about a year and we began going back in spring of 2021. And, you know, a lot has changed since COVID has happened with the county, with the California and the country in general and the world. But we are back and we're excited to get feedback and continue on this path to hopefully get this ordinance adopted. So the project restarted, like I said, in spring of 2021. We're conducting a lot of stakeholder engagement and outreach for residents, including this meeting tonight, as well as businesses, talking with chambers and, you know, engaging businesses, and as well as the cities and towns, their staff members, to hopefully have an ordinance be brought to the Board of Supervisors sometime around fall. Fall would be the earliest that it would be brought forward. And then after hopeful adoption, there would be outreach and technical assistance to businesses following the passage of the ordinance. So I do want to caveat that this is a tentative timeline so far, and adjustments will be made and can be made as we receive work with businesses and receive feedback from the cities and towns on the proposed ordinance and timing. So this is where we're at today. And next slide. So to start this meeting off, I think it's really helpful to talk about what disposable foodware means and how it actually relates to the ordinance in general, this particular ordinance. So when we talk about disposable foodware, we're talking about two main categories: foodware and foodware accessories. And so there's all the things that your food more or less touches: your bowls, plates, clamshells, to-go containers, and your cups for beverages. And we're considering those by and large foodware. And your accessories really are the things that you use to consume your food or beverage, which would be straws, utensils, as well as a whole suite of other accessories, napkins, cocktail sticks, things like that. So this ordinance is really broken down into different requirements for foodware and foodware accessories, and we'll talk about that a lot more shortly. I also wanted to mention that when we reference compostable, what we mean by that is that something is fiber-based. It's made of a natural material such as paper, cardboard, wood, sugarcane, things like that. So when we're talking about compostables, we're not talking about bioplastics. We're talking about a fiber-based compostable product as it pertains to this particular ordinance. So why do we want to replace disposables in the first place? I think, with COVID happening, we all probably ordered takeout once during this past year and a half. And I think that, it's pretty clear why, how you can see these takeout containers, things like that really pile up. But there's a couple key reasons why we want to reduce disposables in the first place. One majorly being to reduce the amount of litter and trash that's in the environment, chemicals as it pertains to foodware, which we'll get into a little bit, and just the overall amount of waste that's being sent to landfill. When we replace a disposable product, whether plastic or a compostable alternative with a reusable option, we're really going to see reductions in that way. We're also going to have less greenhouse gases associated with, producing a disposable product. So we would reduce the amount of overall resources from production, transportation, and overall disposal. Replacing disposables with reusables also helps cities and towns meet their municipal regional stormwater permits, which pertains to how much litter is on the ground and goes into stormwater. And switching to reusables can save money. So when you have to buy compostable or disposable products constantly, you end up spending a lot of money on that. And if you switch to a reusable option over time, you can really see some cost reductions. And there's a fair amount of research out there and case studies, particularly by Upstream. And we're going to be gathering some of that data in Marin County in the coming months that really can show that cost savings. And what is a foodware ordinance? So again, as it pertains to this particular proposed ordinance, it would regulate the type of packaging that could be used for dine-in as well as takeout. It's also going to address the amount of compostability, toxicity, recyclability, all these different things as a part of this ordinance. And the packaging that's really used for dine-in and takeout and temporary events. So all different kinds of a spectrum of events and places. It's also going to potentially include penalties for non-compliance. And it's going to build on the polystyrene packaging ban. So this ordinance is repealing certain pieces of the polystyrene ban, but it's not going to not include those anymore. So you're still going to have the polystyrene ban that's in place, as well as the plastic bag ban. This would just expand upon that. So to get into some of the key ordinance features, there's a couple of them that I really want to highlight here. The first being that the ordinance would be enforced 1 year after adoption. So this is a really key piece of the ordinance, because what we want is for people to become educated on how they can switch to a compliant option or reusable option. It allows businesses to use up existing stock and gear up for when the ordinance would go into full effect and be enforced. So there would be a year after a hopeful adoption where the ordinance would then be in effect, but not enforced. So the first key feature is takeout containers. Takeout foodware must be fiber-based and BPI certified. And BPI stands for the Biodegradable Products Institute. And the reason for foodware having to be BPI certified is because there are concerns around PFAs, which are polyfluorinated compounds that are often found in foodware and are persistent chemicals that don't quite degrade in the composting process. So to not have PFAs as a part of this as a compliant option, the takeout foodware would have to be BPI certified. And we're talking about compostable fiber-based option for the takeout foodware. And again, a reason why we want to focus on this fiber-based compostable alternative as opposed to bioplastics is because where most of Marin County's waste is going and their compost is going is to waste management earth care, which simply doesn't accept bioplastics. They don't break down in the time that's needed, and it's something that is not going to be changing in the near future. So for those reasons and a whole host of other reasons, bioplastics are not going to be a part of this ordinance. The second key feature is a foodware dine-in requirement. And what that means is that if you are dining in at a restaurant, you would have to have a reusable foodware option, or a reusable foodware. So what that means is that we're talking again about foodware versus accessories, but foodware means that plates, bowls, cups, trays would have to be reusable, and your accessories, which would be the utensils, napkins, things like that, couldn't be a disposable compliant option, but the key, just foodware would have to be reusable. And things like plastic stirrers, anything that would be plastic would be no longer allowed. So for instance, a cocktail stick, maybe a plastic cocktail stick would, an option for a compliant alternative would be a wood cocktail stick, or better yet, a reusable cocktail stick. As we move on to takeout accessories, these again are your non-major pieces of takeout ware. So your napkins, utensils, etc., would only be upon request or at a takeout station. So for restaurants and whatnot, let's say you're a coffee shop, you could have a self-service station that could have these accessories available, or have them be upon request. And those would need to be fiber-based and compostable. Additionally, there's a disposable cup charge proposed, which would be 25 cents. And that 25 cents would be retained by the food vendor, and it would be itemized on your receipt at the point of sale. So if you go and you get a cup of coffee and you forget your reusable cup, you would be charged the 25 cents. The 25 cents goes to the vendor. And the county is really not regulating here what the cost of something is. But so a vendor could reduce the cost of a coffee with a reduce the cup of coffee with by reducing it to, let's say the coffee was $3 before and it's $2.75 now, and if with the cup it would be $3 with the disposable cup, or vice versa. So I can explain that more if that was confusing, but that's what we mean by a 25-cent charge. It just needs to be shown on the receipt. And there are some exceptions here. If you are on WIC or EBT, you would not be required to pay the disposable cup charge. And if you need a cup for access reasons, you would also not be required to pay the cup charge. And finally, we have the front and back of house 3-stream collection containers. So what this means is that you would have to have 3-stream recycling, so garbage, recycling, and organics in the front of house for customers to properly dispose of their waste, and also in the back of house. And this is really something that's already a part of existing legislation. SB 1383 and 827, which is already in effect, do require this already. So this is more or less just aligning with state law, but it is important that if someone has a compostable product, that they will be able to compost that product once they're done using it. Who would be covered under this ordinance? So what we're talking about in terms of coverage is anyone who has a health permit. And so this really includes restaurants, grocery stores, carry out, quick service, full service, bakeries, farmers markets, food trucks, etc. So anyone who has a health permit would be required or subject to the ordinance. And I would like to point out as well that the county and county facilities would also be covered under this ordinance as well. So it is not just these businesses, the county is also required to do it under this ordinance. And I wanted to take a second to look at what some of the messaging could look like. You know, as we've been going over foodware and foodware accessories and all these things, it's really helpful, at least to me, to see what the visual looks like. And so we're really talking about a good, compliant, and a not allowed, you know, policy. And so we have, you know, reusables, bring your own reusables. That's really the best option here. You're going to have your compostable and aluminum options would be compliant, but not the best option. And plastic and plastic lined paper would be going away. So that's what some of the messaging will look like in terms of business outreach and resident outreach. I wanted to also talk about, you know, those who already have a foodware ordinance in place. These foodware ordinances are all over California as well as across the nation, but there's a couple especially close to home, including 3 in the county right now. We have Fairfax, San Anselmo, and Sausalito that all have foodware ordinances. And you have a lot of neighbors nearby who also have some sort of foodware ordinance. San Francisco being a big one, a couple big counties, Santa Cruz, San Mateo County, as well as a lot of cities. I know Sonoma County is also considering a foodware ordinance. And you know, this list is not exhaustive. I actually learned that the city of Culver City just adopted an ordinance 2 nights ago that requires use-in for on-site dining, as well as Arcata, who adopted an ordinance in 2020, which requires not only a 25-cent food charge or 25-cent charge for disposable cups, but also a 25-cent charge for takeout containers. And here's a little timeline of some of the our next steps. Again, the timelines are tentative. This is the timeline as it stands right now, but we will be conducting stakeholder feedback until around August or later. The public draft comment period for our second draft of the ordinance, which is available at the Marin County website, marincounty.org.ehs. We're still accepting comments. You can access that and send comments to us about the ordinance. So we can definitely receive your comments there, and bringing the ordinance to the Board of Supervisors. Again, this would be no earlier than fall of 2021. And we would then have interested cities and towns follow soon after with county adoption. That would be within a 6-month window, and enforcement would begin 1 year after adoption. We also have a flyer available tonight that kind of condenses what the main requirements of the ordinance are and the timeline, and I'll be able to drop that in the chat after I finish sharing my screen. But with that, we are done with the portion of the main presentation portion, and we'll get into the Q&A. I wanted to also throw my email up here if you have any comments or questions, if you'd prefer to email me directly, or again, you can submit a comment on the county's website around the ordinance, but it's available right here, and I can also drop it in the chat. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I saw a couple of comments and questions come up, and we can start taking some questions and comments. All right. So we have a couple of questions from Jason, and I can also I can unmute you if that's helpful. But your first question was cups must be reusable. So yes, if you are dining in, you would have to have a reusable cup. If you were doing takeout, you would have a compostable compliant cup. So I hope that answers the question, and feel free to raise your hand if you have any other comments. And your second question was if this is only in unincorporated Marin, any cities that are planning on participating in the beginning. So yes, right now this is a ordinance purely for unincorporated Marin County, but the intention of the ordinance is to have everyone stay on, or have all the cities and towns join in. And should that happen, the enforcement of the ordinance would be by EHS, Environmental Health Services, and the food inspectors. So if there was a united ordinance, a countywide ordinance, EHS would do the enforcement as a part of their food inspections. But if not everyone signs on, then we would have to go to we'd have to, figure out what the enforcement would look like. But that's the way it's proposed right now. Great. I have another one from Leslie. What are the plans for the county to provide technical support to businesses to enable them to comply? Purchasing advice, storage of materials, etc. That's a great question, Leslie. So we do have two main things that we are doing for technical assistance. The county has developed a grant program, and really what the intention of the grant program is to provide technical assistance, outreach, and have a consultant help businesses switch to reusable compliant foodware, receive hands-on assistance, and utilize grant money to purchase some of the products initially. So this is something that is going to be happening this summer. And after hopeful adoption, there would also be technical assistance and outreach to unincorporated Marin County businesses under the current scope of this project. So great question. All right, we have a lot of questions, so I'm gonna take them slowly. Richard, let's see, are there plans to provide those affected with a list of acceptable products to replace unacceptable products? They would all likely appreciate SKUs and product names. So that's a great question, Richard. We actually have a resource available right now on the county's website that clearly shows what an acceptable product and a non-acceptable product is. There are some cost comparisons as well as what the cost differential of a compostable option versus a plastic option. That doesn't include reusables, which would reduce the cost overall to stop switching from a disposable option to a reusable option. And things do change with, especially with COVID right now, with products being available or unavailable. I would like to say that the county, if it's deemed that a material or a product doesn't have a viable compostable option, that piece of the ordinance would not be covered. Or would not be enforced upon until a later point when it becomes a viable option. So great. All right, I'm going to keep going down the list. All right, I am Anne Marie, and we used to exchange metal tins with our favorite Indian restaurant for takeout. Is that something that the county restaurants could do after the county ordinance is adopted? So absolutely, this ordinance does not preclude anyone from using compostable takeout or having a customer bring compostable takeout containers. We are providing some guidance for the businesses on the business side of how to do that safe and effectively, but that would be allowed under the ordinance, or the ordinance would not disallow that. All right. Will there be a criteria set for procurement of reusables? For example, what will prevent businesses from ordering bulk, cheap, heavy-duty plastic reusables from overseas just to comply with the dine-in portion? So thank you, Anonymous, for that question. We will be providing, as a part of the technical assistance and outreach, information on how to procure these products. We're going to be learning a lot of information about how that goes, and specifically in Marin County, how that goes as a part of the grant program this summer. But that will be information that we will be providing. Maureen, what kind of outreach will we be doing to cultivate community support for the ordinance? It would be great to let our businesses know that we appreciate their being on board and maybe feature them and create a positive buzz. That's an excellent point. And I think, we are not really at that step yet with businesses being on board and switching to reusables, but that's a great point to consider and something that I think would be really helpful to promote businesses that are making the switch and doing a really good job. All right. Let's see. Steve asked, would fast casual places like Chipotle or Panda Express need to get dishwashers for the dining ware that customers would need to be using if they dine in? So that really depends on what they are, what you're considering takeout and what you're considering dining in. I think most of those, places like Chipotle or Panda Express, everyone is considered a takeout person. So in that case, you just have to have the compliant or reusable option. But if people were going to be dining in, they would have to have, again, we're talking about plates, cups, and food trays. So things like that would be a reusable option. Those would have to be required to be reusable. All right, I'm going to switch to some of the chats because I know these are popping up, and actually it looks like we have a hand raised. So why don't I talk to Janice?
Hi, thank you for putting this on. And I'm from Plastic Free Marin. And I just wanted I put a suggestion into the chat about San Mateo's Foodware Aware program. Their webpage is phenomenal. And it would be great if the county could do something like that, because it not only addresses the business and how to implement it very carefully, carefully and clearly, but it also addresses the public and all the questions around it, and it gives the a great vendor, a list and all kinds of things. So I put the link in there, and I hope you guys look at it because it's really, really valuable. And I think it would make it easier for the implementation process. And then I also have two questions, and one is, what would prevent the ordinance adoption for this fall? Because I think it's really important to really move on this, because it's been going on for a while. And now that we know that reusables are safe, and it's pretty safe to do all this stuff, that what would be any kind of thing that would prevent it from moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the main things are that we want to make sure that we provide adequate outreach to businesses post-COVID. A lot of our outreach was done pre-COVID, assuming that COVID was never going to happen in the first place. So we want to make sure that businesses can still provide feedback and input, as well as cities and towns, to make sure that they're aware of the ordinance upcoming. And so those would be the two main drivers for what could potentially push the timeline back a little.
Okay, and then I have one other question, and it doesn't really pertain exactly to the ordinance, but when will the Environmental Health Division add language on the website to let the restaurants and public know that they can bring their own reusables because they're safe? And it's, I know when a couple of us spoke to Dr. Willis on the supervisors meeting a couple of weeks ago, he said that he would get that done because it is safe, and it's proven to be safe now. It's been proven to be safe for a while, but now it is. But I went on the website and I don't see anything that has been updated, and I think it's really important to get that updated.
Yeah, I would not be, maybe Greg, if you're—
Dana may be able to answer that, or Greg.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank you.
I'll jump in, but Greg would probably be the best one for this. Is we have, it's my understanding from Greg that we have notified all businesses that they can begin to use reusables. We are, depending on state guidance for public health, and we have no special local guidance due to COVID that applies to reusables or anything. So, we sent out a press release, it's my understanding, and we can continue to try and push that as well.
Yeah, and it should be clear that it's for bring your own as well.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. All right. We'll move on to a couple more questions. I'll jump back and forth from the chat and the Q&A. So Pat asked, will current reusable restaurant foodware be okay? Will restaurants be permitted to sell reusable and or compostable foodware? Yes to both of those. So absolutely. Morgan and Reese, you were in 4th grade. My friend and I met with Supervisor Rodoni to talk about banning straws and plastic foodware. I'm now going to 7th grade. So excited to see this happening. Thank you. Thank you. That's great to hear. All right, Jane, has there been any pushback by the county or towns, or is everyone on board with this ordinance? So there, I think everyone, I can't really speak for the towns and cities in Marin County. The county obviously developed the ordinance, so we are fully on board. And like I mentioned, we do have 3 ordinances already in place. Fairfax and San Anselmo have essentially identical ordinances to what is being proposed as the countywide ordinance, and Sausalito's is very similar. So I think there's general interest and excitement, but ironing out the details is what we're currently trying to do. Okay, that one got answered. Thank you, Eva, for sharing a reusable foodware shopping list. All right. I could not view prior questions, only hear answers. I apologize. It looks like I need to type those answers to see the answer. But I think what we can do is also provide some feedback and a written question and answer as well, if that would be helpful. All right, looks like a couple of people can't see the chat messages either. So I think that's in the Q&A versus not, so I can try to have a transcript for those. All right. Okay, thank you. All right. Eva, can we talk about the ways we can support the process in Marin cities and towns? How can we help? That's an awesome question, Eva. So what you can do is comment and a positive feedback on the ordinance itself. You could also talk to local restaurants and businesses about, you as a customer wanting to see a reusable or compostable alternative, and also show up to the meeting when we eventually do bring this to council, to the Board of Supervisors, and show your support that way. So those are the main ways that you could show support right now, and we appreciate any support that you do give us. All right, I'm going to move back over to the Q&A. We have Jason. Can you confirm that Marin County has the infrastructure in place for composting? Some cities have instituted these ordinances, yet waste companies do not have the infrastructure. So we'll answer that first part of the question. So the question is around infrastructure. As a part of this ordinance, we have had meetings with the haulers and processors in Marin County to confirm that they can handle compostable products. The main thing that again we want to talk about is not bioplastics or plastic lined products. So those are not currently accepted in the infrastructure, and that's not what's being proposed in this ordinance. We are not proposing any sort of bioplastics allowed as a part of this ordinance. So I hope that clarifies everything. All right. So Alexis had a question. One issue is that bioplastic cups is allowed under the ordinance are not compostable locally, as you stated. However, many of these cups advertise compostability and are compostable in places like San Francisco with industrial composting facilities. In San Anselmo, this has meant that people are using bioplastic cups in the compost bin, or putting bioplastic cups in the compost bin. What messaging, outreach, enforcement will be provided to limit contamination of green waste? That's an excellent question. So I do want to clarify that bioplastics and bioplastic cups are not allowed under the ordinance. How we're trying to handle that is because it can be pretty tricky with plastic lined cups, and that a lot of cups do on the market currently do need the plastic lining, or a PLA lining, a compostable plastic lining. And what we're proposing as part of this ordinance is that those products, the cups, for instance, would not be enforced under the ordinance until a viable compostable option is available. There's things that are coming up every single day that have new options that are not PLA and they're not plastic, particularly with cups. But for right now, until the county determines that there is a viable option, that just piece of the ordinance wouldn't be enforced. So I think that hopefully answers your question. Compostable cups are, Marin County very much does have industrial composting facilities, and due to a whole host of reasons, mainly the fact that they're OMRI certified, organic certified, they cannot accept bioplastics, as well as there just are issues with bioplastics breaking down in industrial composting facilities. So for those reasons, we are not including bioplastics as a part of the ordinance. Follow-up question from Alexis: will the grant program that the county is setting up be available to businesses and incorporate in Marin? If so, will the grants be available for businesses and jurisdictions that have passed similar ordinances already? So yes, the grant program would be available to all incorporated and unincorporated businesses. We will be trying to make sure that there's a mix of different businesses, so it's not just one specific type of business that is being targeted. We want a whole host of different types of businesses, but that would include all jurisdictions. Anonymous: will there be model language for purchasing policies for businesses that favor fiber-based materials? Can we restrict selling the gross polluters and single-use contaminants from being sold in Marin County? So that is a tricky notion. So what this ordinance is proposing is not to restrict the sale of these products necessarily, but just require what is being used in Marin County for foodware and foodware accessories. So there, like I think I said prior, that there will be purchasing policy as a part of the outreach to businesses and kind of a technical assistance toolkit that they will be able to provide. All right. Steve asked, what might the communication look like to make sure that Marin overall understand that this ordinance in the fall would only be for the relatively small unincorporated area, and that for large cities such as San Rafael, Novato, etc., need to take action to join the party? Have Fairfax and Selma Sausalito given any indication that they would, etc., etc. So yes, to get to your question, we are, working with the cities and towns staff, as well as we recently just sent out a memo to Marin managers, so all the city and town managers in Marin County, to make sure that they're aware of the ordinance, and we'll be providing more meetings to city and town staff as needed to make sure that everyone is on board and in alignment. It is important that for enforcement to be done by environmental health services, that everyone would need to be on board with an ordinance that is the countywide ordinance, and that there would be a 6-month period of when cities and towns would be able to sign on. Morgan asks, for grocery stores that sell pre-packaged food, if the food is produced outside of Marin County, will packaging need to be fiber-based? That is a good question. So the ordinance does specify that if it's produced in Marin County, that it would need to be to meet the requirements of the ordinance. So if, let's say, it was a pre-made sandwich at a grocery store, that would have to be in compliant foodware. Anonymous, will compost disposable be available on main streets in Marin? That is a good question. We that's not a part of this ordinance per se in terms of outdoor containers. When we spoke about one of the key requirements being indoor and out, in front of house and back of house containers, that means inside the business. So those would not necessarily translate to outdoor containers, say, at a park or something like that. So that's not a part of this ordinance. Kim asked, will the bio produce bags used at grocery stores still be able to be used? So that is not going to be covered under this food ordinance, foodware ordinance. We're going to be targeting specifically foodware and foodware accessories. So that would not be a part of this ordinance. Morgan asked, when will the implementation of the 3-bin front and back of house take place? Which department of Marin will be coordinating this change? How can we all help? Excellent question. That's going to be, again, it kind of depends on if all of the cities and towns sign on to the ordinance or not. But there is some backup coverage with this particular requirement, as it is a requirement of SB 1383, which goes into effect January 1, 2022, and is actually already in effect as a part of a statewide law. That doesn't quite have as much teeth, but that's kind of to be determined on who will be exactly looking at the 3 bins. If everyone signs on in the cities and towns of Marin County, then it would probably be EHS who would be doing that. But if not, then it would probably be a part of a separate requirement under the state law SB 1383. Richard asked, please post on county website links that we ambassadors can share with food sellers in nearby counties to educate them. Also links we can share with Sonoma County staff and electeds to educate, help us convert more food vendors into those that see the need for this. That's a great point. Thank you so much. We will try to post resources and have resources available on the website, as well as, as we continue this process and develop the toolkit for businesses, and just information that the counties, more than happy to share that information with other jurisdictions, or, have that be publicly available. Follow-up question for the grocery stores and restaurants, thinking about unincorporated Marin County, coastal Marin, where some businesses may produce and package foods in Sonoma County, but sell them in Marin. Guessing we need to comment on that for additional consideration. I don't quite understand the question, but I'm happy to also discuss this in via email or whatnot. But again, with the produce, or with the food that would be packaged in Marin, would be required to be in that compostable packaging. However, if it's being distributed outside of Marin County and there's no legislation there, then that wouldn't necessarily apply to those counties. But if it's being produced, then it would need to be in that option, the compostable compliant option. All right, let's get back to the chat, because let's see, we have plenty of more. All right. Can you share a copy of the press release or confirm that it's on the county website? Would like to share. If it's in relation to the press release that Dana mentioned, I'm not quite sure if it's on the county website yet, but we're happy to share.
It's Dana. It is on the county website, and I shared that link in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
And also a link to our main Reusable Foodware Ordinance page, which includes all the resources we've developed, the results from the survey we ran in 2019. Basically, that's the one-stop shop where we're posting all sorts of information on this as it becomes available.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. It looks like we are getting slower on the questions. Eva said, let's throw a little language about reuse for outdoor dining parklets to keep up with post-COVID trends. That's a great point. Something that I think we want to include in the toolkit for businesses. That would be a key piece if there would be, dining in, but dining outside. All right. Jane asked, what about plastic clamshells for things like berries in the store? I assume this does not cover those things as they are produced out of county. Yes, that is correct. So if it's not produced in the county, it would not be regulated by this ordinance. And unfortunately, it is very tricky to require things like that.
And Claire, this is Dana again. Can you
Yeah.
clarify for me as well? But this ordinance applies to food ready to eat, packaging for to-go food and things like that. If there is a business that manufactures food in Marin County to be sold in a grocery store in the regular aisles, not in the deli, that is not within this scope, is my understanding. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
That is a different enforcement mechanism and everything else. EHS, it would be a separate effort to expand to include that scope.
Yes. So I know there's, when we talk about foodware, there's so many different, ideas and what foodware actually means. So thank you for bringing that question up and clarifying that. We're limited in this scope to discussing the foodware and the foodware accessories for kind of like ready-made products. So instead of the grocery store bags and things like that.
Also, Claire, this is Greg. Those types of manufacturing businesses actually would not have a permit, usually not have a permit through EHS. They would actually have a state permit, so not regulated by us.
Great. Thanks for clarifying that. It's always helpful to have you with EHS clarify who actually has, everyone under the sun who has food permits. All right. All right. It looks like we will try to post all the links that were shared to tonight, along with some of the questions, just so everyone can access that. Morgan, sorry, my last question was confusing. I was speaking to businesses with headquarters / production facilities in Sonoma County that sell food that is ready to eat in Marin County and Point Reyes. It sounds like packaged food being sold in Marin County is not subject to the fiber-based packaging. Yes, I think with the clarification from Greg on who is covered under the food permits, which is really, who is covered under the scope of this ordinance, that you are correct. And we can also seek to clarify that, kind of specific piece of the ordinance as well, to make sure that it's very clear. All right, thank you, Chris, for sharing those links. And I'll keep on for any other questions. In the meantime, I just want to again thank you all for sharing, having your questions ready, engaging with us tonight. It's very exciting to see so much support and really good questions about how this ordinance works and its different features. So I appreciate that. And thank you for everyone also sharing the resources. All right. Sounds like everyone is kind of wrapping up. So feel free to jump off if you are, if you don't have any further questions. Again, really appreciate everyone's time. I'm also going to put in the chat my email, but again, feel free to also comment on the county's website, on the Reusable Foodware Ordinance, that will also go to us and be a part of the final update and considerations. So thank you all so much for joining. Really, really appreciate it. Here's my email. And I'll be on for any other questions as well.
Claire, and actually it might be a good question for Greg. Did you see the question in the chat? Will farm stands be subject to these requirements? Greg, does EHS regulate farm stands?
It depends what the farm stand does. If I believe it correctly, some of them that are with their own farm, doing their own produce, are not regulated. Sometimes if they're coming to a farmer's market, they will be. So it kind of depends how they're selling it and where. And also if they're preparing the either vegetables, are they cutting the vegetables, preparing it, putting it into a container? Some of those are regulated. So it depends on if you have oversight or not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and appreciate you both catching that. I must have skipped over that one by accident. Thanks for sharing that, Bridget. That's awesome to see some recognition for businesses. Thanks, Maureen, for the feedback. Right, looks like we're pretty much wrapped up for questions. I'll stay on for maybe 5 more minutes in case anyone has any other questions. Otherwise, again, thanks so much for joining.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate everyone joining us tonight.
Any last questions? Good question, Rhonda. I believe there was about 25, 30, 20,
I think at the most I saw 33 participants. So, and
Great.
then take out the panel and then some county staff. I would say we were at about 28.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Greg, for that. It's always helpful to pool existing resources and things like that. All right.
I think, let me.
I think we are.
I don't see any more questions coming in.
Yep.
Got
I think
folks dropping off.
Yep. All right.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you all. And feel
Thank you
free
all.
to reach out
Thank
with
you,
any
Claire,
other.
for leading us.
Yes,
Yep.
thank you.
No problem. All right.
Well
Good
done.
night.
All right. Good night.